Listen carefully because this is not a soft idea and it does not arrive quietly. It comes like something that breaks through denial. There are moments in life when someone walks away from you or pulls back or acts like they are gone, but something in them does not fully leave. Their body is not near you anymore, their voice is silent, their pride may be locked behind distance, yet their mind is still connected in ways they do not openly admit. On the surface, they continue their life. They act normal. They pretend they have moved on. But inside, there can be conflict that does not settle easily. It is not always dramatic, and it is not always obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, private, and confusing even for them. A part of them keeps returning to thoughts of you without permission. They try to stop it, but thoughts do not always obey effort. This kind of experience is not about simple attraction. It is not about a passing interest that fades with time. It is deeper, in a way that people often struggle to explain. When something reaches the emotional core of a person, it does not stay neatly in the past. It becomes part of their inner world. It shows up again and again, especially in moments when their mind is not busy. Even when they tell themselves, "You are not important anymore," another part of them reacts differently. They may repeat to themselves that they are fine, that it meant nothing, that they have moved on. But inner experience does not always match outer statements. The mind can speak one language, while emotion speaks another. The conscious mind is where people create control. It builds explanations that sound acceptable. It tries to stay composed. It says things like, "Everything is fine," or "It does not matter." But beneath that surface, there is another layer of experience that does not respond to simple statements. It holds impressions, feelings, and emotional memories that do not disappear just because someone decides they should. When a person has been emotionally affected, they carry traces of that interaction. Not always as clear memories, but as feelings that return without warning. A tone of voice, a moment of silence, a certain expression, or even something small can trigger a full internal reaction. This is why someone might suddenly think of you at random times, not because they choose it, but because something in them is activated by association. Sometimes people underestimate how deeply a single moment can affect another person. It does not always take a long relationship or a long history. Even a short but intense connection can leave a strong impression. If in that moment they felt seen, understood, or emotionally awakened in a new way, it can stay with them much longer than expected. You may have shown them something about themselves they had not noticed before. Maybe it was a feeling of being understood without effort. Maybe it was the experience of being emotionally present with someone in a way they rarely experience. When someone sees a version of themselves reflected through another person in a powerful way, it can stay in their memory. After that, their mind can start comparing. Other experiences may feel less meaningful. Other interactions may feel less real or less intense. Even if they try to replace the feeling with new situations or new people, something inside them notices the difference. This creates restlessness. It creates searching. In this state, the mind can begin to replay moments. It can revisit conversations. It can question small details. Why did you say that? Why did you act that way? Why did things change? Why did it end or pause or shift? These questions do not always have clear answers, but the mind still tries to solve them as if they are unfinished problems. Over time, you can become a strong internal reference point for them. Not always because they want it, but because the emotional impact created a strong imprint. And when something is emotionally strong, it does not stay neatly contained. It returns in thought, in memory, and sometimes in emotional reactions that seem to appear without reason. There is also something important about resistance. When someone tries very hard not to think about a person, that effort itself can keep the memory active. The mind does not always erase things by force. Sometimes the attempt to push something away keeps it present. So even when they tell themselves they should not think about you, the thought still appears. What is ignored does not simply disappear. It can move deeper into the background of the mind and continue influencing feelings without being fully recognized. A person may think they are over something, while emotionally they are still reacting to it in subtle ways. Their behavior may reveal more than their words. They might become quiet when your name is mentioned. They might check updates or revisit memories. They might react emotionally in small ways they do not fully explain. From the outside, it may not look dramatic, but internally it can feel active and unresolved. It is also possible that what they are reacting to is not only you as a person, but what you represented to them emotionally. People often connect others with deeper internal needs or hidden parts of themselves. You may have represented comfort, understanding, intensity, or emotional recognition that they were missing or not fully aware of. In that case, their mind is not only attached to the memory of you, but also to the feeling they experienced around you. That feeling becomes symbolic. It represents something they want to find again, even if they do not consciously understand what it is. This is why the mind can keep returning, even when logic says it should not. Symbols inside the mind are powerful. They do not fade quickly. When someone associates a strong emotional meaning with another person, that person can remain active in their inner world long after physical distance appears. It is not always about obsession in a simple sense. It is often about unresolved emotional meaning. Sometimes a person is not fully aware of this process happening inside them. In daily life, they act normal. They focus on tasks. They interact with others, and they may even convince themselves that everything is behind them. But at different times, especially in silence or at night, the mind can become more active and bring back what was not processed. They may remember how they felt around you. They may remember small details that seemed unimportant at the time. They may think about what they should have said or done differently. These thoughts can appear suddenly and feel stronger than expected, even if they try to ignore them afterward. There is also a human tendency to hide emotional vulnerability. People often prefer to appear stable rather than admit confusion or emotional impact. So they may act like nothing affected them deeply, even when something did. This creates a gap between outer behavior and inner experience. On the surface, they seem controlled. They seem unchanged. But internally, there can still be movement. Thoughts return, feelings echo, memories appear in unexpected moments. The mind continues processing even when the person believes they have already moved on. Sometimes they may also compare current experiences with what they felt with you. Not always directly, but indirectly through feeling. If something felt meaningful or emotionally alive before, ordinary situations can feel less engaging afterward. This comparison is not always conscious, but it influences perception. The mind has a way of holding on to experiences that felt emotionally significant. Even if time passes, it does not automatically erase emotional intensity. It integrates it, it stores it, and sometimes it replays it when something similar appears or when emotional space becomes quiet. Over time, you can become part of their internal reference system for emotional memory. Not because you are physically present, but because you left an imprint that their mind keeps revisiting. This can happen even if the relationship was brief or unclear, because emotional intensity does not depend only on duration. In some cases, what makes it stronger is incompleteness. When something does not fully resolve, the mind keeps trying to complete it internally. It searches for meaning, closure, or understanding. If it does not find it in reality, it continues the search in thought. This is why certain memories feel active. They are not finished in the mind. They remain open in some way. The person may not even realize they are still emotionally processing it. They only notice that the memory returns again and again, sometimes unexpectedly. At the same time, it is important to understand that this is not always about control or possession. It is about how the human mind stores emotional experiences. When something touches a deeper layer of feeling, it becomes part of the inner narrative. It shapes how future experiences are interpreted. Even if someone tries to replace it with new connections, the original emotional impression may still remain as a reference point. This does not mean they are stuck in the past in a simple way. It means the experience became part of their emotional memory structure. And once something becomes part of that structure, it can influence thoughts, reactions, and comparisons long after the moment has passed. It can appear in dreams, in sudden memories, or in emotional shifts that seem to come without clear reason. So if someone seems distant on the outside, but still emotionally reactive in subtle ways, it is often because the mind has not fully integrated what happened. It is still processing meaning. It is still organizing emotional experience. And that process does not always follow conscious intention. In the end, what remains is not just a person in memory, but the emotional impact of what was experienced. And emotional impact does not always disappear with time. It changes form. It moves deeper. And sometimes it returns in thought long after everything else seems to have ended. Because what you were was real. And real things do not disappear easily from the human mind. They stay. They settle. They leave an imprint that is not visible on the surface, but is felt deep inside. You brought something into their life that did not feel artificial or rehearsed. You brought presence. You brought emotional weight. You brought a kind of experience that cannot be easily copied or replaced. And when someone experiences that kind of realness, something inside them changes. Even if they do not admit it. Even if they try to act like nothing happened. Even if they move forward with their life and pretend they are unaffected. Inside, there can still be movement that does not stop quickly. The mind does not erase emotional impact just because time passes. It stores it. It reorganizes it. It brings it back in moments when the person is not prepared for it. That is why memories return without permission. That is why feelings can rise without warning. That is why silence does not always mean peace. Sometimes, silence only means that something has not been spoken yet. When a connection is real, it creates weight inside the psyche. It does not stay as a simple memory. It becomes part of the inner structure of how a person feels and reacts. They may not even understand this happening. On the outside, they appear normal. They continue routines. They speak to others. They smile. They act like everything is fine. But inside, there can be a different story running at the same time. A story that keeps returning to you without invitation. A story that does not follow logic. A story that appears in quiet moments, in late nights, in pauses between tasks, in small gaps where the mind is free to wander. This is not always something they choose. It is something that happens when emotional intensity has not been fully processed. The conscious mind tries to organize life. It tries to create control. It tries to say that everything is fine and nothing is missing. But the deeper mind does not always agree. It remembers emotional truth even when the conscious mind tries to rewrite it. It holds on to feelings that were strong, even if they were confusing. It keeps images. It keeps moments. It keeps sensations that were never fully understood. And when something inside a person is not fully understood, it does not disappear. It returns in different forms. It returns as thought. It returns as curiosity. It returns as emotional discomfort. It returns as sudden memory that seems to come from nowhere. Sometimes they may find themselves thinking of you without knowing why. Sometimes your presence appears in their mind during completely unrelated moments. Sometimes a sound, a place, a phrase, or even a random situation triggers something connected to you. And in that moment, the mind reacts before logic can respond. This is how emotional imprint works. It does not follow rules. It does not ask permission. It simply activates what has been stored deeply inside. And when someone has been emotionally moved in a strong way, they often begin to compare. not always consciously, but internally. Other experiences may feel less intense. Other people may feel less emotionally alive. Other moments may feel quieter in comparison. This does not always mean they are unhappy. It means something in their emotional memory has been marked as significant. And when something is marked as significant, the mind naturally returns to it again and again to understand it. That is when replaying begins. Conversations come back. Moments are re-examined. Words are reinterpreted. Silence is questioned. Meaning is searched for in things that may have seemed small at the time, but now feel important in memory. The mind tries to complete what feels unfinished. It tries to close emotional loops. It tries to create clarity where there was emotional intensity without explanation. And when it cannot find closure in reality, it continues the search internally. This is why certain connections feel like they remain active even after they end. Not because the person is physically present, but because the emotional processing is still ongoing inside the mind. Something was felt deeply enough that it cannot be simply deleted. Even resistance makes this stronger. When someone tries very hard not to think about you, the mind often does the opposite in the background. Effort creates focus. Focus creates repetition. Repetition strengthens memory. So even denial can keep the connection alive in a strange way. What is pushed away does not always disappear. Sometimes it moves deeper. It goes into quieter parts of the mind and continues to exist there without being fully noticed. It influences reactions. It shapes emotions. It appears in subtle ways that are not always understood. That is why a person might act like they are unaffected, but still show small emotional reactions when something reminds them of you. They may become distant. They may become curious. They may become unsettled without clear reason. Their behavior may reveal what their words do not. Because words are often controlled. Words are often carefully chosen. But emotional reactions are less controlled. They come from deeper layers where honesty is automatic and unfiltered. Sometimes, what they are reacting to is not only you as a person, but what you represented emotionally inside them. You may have reflected something they were missing in themselves. You may have awakened feelings they had not accessed in a long time. You may have created a sense of emotional recognition that felt rare to them. When that happens, the mind does not only store the person, it stores the emotional state connected to that person. And it keeps returning to it, not just for memory, but for feeling. This is where emotional symbolism begins. You stop being just a memory and become a symbol inside their inner world. A symbol of how they felt. A symbol of what they experienced. A symbol of something they may not be able to easily recreate elsewhere. Symbols are powerful because they do not fade easily. They stay active in imagination and memory. They return in dreams. They return in reflection. They return in moments of emotional silence. So even when someone tries to move forward, part of their mind may still circle back to that symbolic experience. Not because they are stuck in the past in a simple way, but because something inside them is still trying to understand what it meant. At the same time, people are often not fully aware of how deeply they are affected. They may believe they are fine. They may act like they are over it. They may focus on daily life and distract themselves with new experiences. But emotional processing does not always follow conscious awareness. It continues in the background. It shows up in unexpected thoughts. It shows up in emotional waves that seem to come out of nowhere. It shows up in memory flashes that interrupt ordinary moments. Sometimes they are in the middle of something simple, and suddenly you appear in their thoughts. Sometimes they hear something that reminds them of you. Sometimes they feel a mood shift they cannot explain. This is not always dramatic. It is often quiet but persistent. And the more they try to ignore it, the more it continues in subtle ways. Because the mind does not easily erase what has emotional weight, It integrates it slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes without full awareness. This is why you may have felt at times that your presence still exists in their emotional space, even when physical distance is there. Not because of fantasy, but because emotional experience does not end at separation. It continues as internal processing. But there is also a deeper truth in all of this that applies to both sides. When someone is strongly affected by you, it is not always a sign that you are meant to return to them. Sometimes it is a sign that something in them has been awakened, that they must now understand on their own. Because real connection does not only attach people to each other, it also reveals people to themselves. It exposes their emotional patterns, it shows their attachments, it highlights their inner needs, it brings unconscious feelings into awareness. And that process can be uncomfortable. It can feel like confusion, it can feel like emotional instability, it can feel like not knowing why someone still matters so much inside their mind. But sometimes, that discomfort is not punishment. It is awareness rising to the surface. It is the mind trying to make sense of emotional truth. It is internal change trying to happen. And change is never silent. It creates noise inside the mind. It creates comparison. It creates reflection. It creates emotional tension between letting go and holding on. So when someone appears to be losing themselves in thoughts of you, it is not always about possession or obsession in a simple way. It can also be about unresolved emotional meaning. Something they experienced has not been fully integrated yet, and until it is integrated, it returns. Not as constant thought all the time, but as interruptions, as memories, as feelings, as questions that do not fully go away. You may become part of their internal landscape in that way, not as someone physically present, but as something emotionally significant that the mind keeps revisiting while it tries to understand itself better. And over time, what remains is not just memory of a person, but memory of a feeling. A feeling that the mind cannot easily categorize or replace. A feeling that continues to exist in layers of thought long after the moment has passed. That is how emotional imprint works. It does not end when something ends externally. It continues until it is fully understood internally.